Jonathan Lemire, I want to take the question to you about the significance of what was so forcefully denied by Donald Trump and his campaign, because it seems that Andrew's explanation of this is that this closes the circle. So we knew that Paul Manafort had taken data, and I've worked on campaigns. The internal polls and the targeting data isn't even distributed widely among an entire campaign staff. It's really held closely by senior staff. There is no function for a foreign government to have that kind of data unless they're aiding said campaign. So this does seem to close the link. It's something that the Trump campaign denied over and over and over again. And it seemed to come from Donald Trump's ego saying, I won, I'm a big boy, I won all by myself, I didn't need Putin's help. But this seems to blow that out of the water.
Nicole, it sure looks like collusion, doesn't it? Which, of course, we know that then President Trump denied repeatedly. That was his mantra: no collusion, no collusion. But you're right. This is extraordinary evidence. This is a significant development today. By far, the furthest that we have heard that any of the last three administrations, how far the Biden administration was willing to go to suggest the link between the Russians and Donald Trump's campaign. We know the Obama administration was largely silent during 2016. Trump himself, of course, and his administration didn't do anything about it. But now we're seeing a change, and it is significant, as you just laid out. That's very prized data, the campaign that has ended up in Mr. Kilimnik's hands. That is something in a normal campaign very few staffers have access to because it is so important. So it does seem that, at least in some measure, the Russians were interested in perhaps trying to help the Trump campaign. Now, what exactly they did with that data remains unclear, but if they used it, perhaps it doesn't take too much of an inference or a leap to suggest that maybe that data was used for their own sort of ad campaigns. We know how they bombarded social media in 2016. We know the disinformation campaign. We know that if they had access to that, they could perhaps more finely target their own efforts. So this is a significant development, and it comes, Nicole, certainly as this new administration, the Biden administration, takes a much harder line with Russia in terms of sanctions, in terms of rushing back Putin and warning him about the buildup in Ukraine and the crackdown against human rights, particularly Alexei Navalny, the dissident, who is right now in poor health, reportedly, in a Russian prison.
Clinton, I want to read you the two investigations that established what we knew before today about Kilimnik and what he did with the polling data that Paul Manafort gave him from the Trump campaign. The Mueller investigation established this. Because of questions about Manafort's credibility and our limited ability to gather evidence on what happened to the polling data after it went to Kilimnik, the office could not assess what Kilimnik or others he may have given it to did with it. The office did not identify evidence of a connection between Manafort sharing polling data and Russia's interference in the election, which had already been reported by U.S. media outlets at the time of the August 2nd meeting between Manafort and Kilimnik. The Senate Intel investigation seemed to go a little further. They wrote this: a channel for coordination on the GRU hack and leak operation may have existed through Kilimnik, but the committee had limited insight into Kilimnik's communications with Manafort and redacted, all of whom used sophisticated communication security practices. The committee was unable to reliably determine why Manafort shared sensitive internal polling data or campaign strategy with Kilimnik. What the sanctions language describes in sanctioning Konstantin Kilimnik is certainty that what Manafort gave Kilimnik was then consumed by, delivered to Russian intelligence. What is the significance of closing that circle, as Jonathan said, establishing collusion?
That was the missing part, Nicole, because there were several pieces to it, and that also came out in the sanctions today. So if you rewind, Kilimnik is an agent of the GRU, the Russian military. The GRU is the hacking outfit that went after Hillary Clinton. You know, many of her emails, the DCCC, many of these targets were from GRU hackers. Separately, there's a guy named Prigozhin. Prigozhin was the guy who ran the Internet Research Agency, better known as the Russian Troll Farm. They were doing very targeted social media operations. And what would they need? Well, it would be great to know two things. One, what is the Trump campaign strategy? Two, where would they refine their targeting at? And then there's really a third one, which is how far do we want to go with the Trump campaign? So if you know that data, if you know both the Trump campaign strategy and what the polling data is saying, and you're Vladimir Putin, you can start to make calculations about how much you want to interfere in the election and where would you interfere in the election? Where would you pull those levers going into Election Day? So that's a very powerful loop. It's three parts. It's hacking, it's influence on social media, and now we know about actual agents who are doing inside the Trump campaign, having connections in terms of what that strategy is. That is the triad of a perfect influence and interference campaign going into election 2016. And I would note, Nicole, that Konstantin Kilimnik, he is still on Twitter. I guarantee you, he's probably watching the segment right now. And he has been spotted several times, tweeting about what's going on with U.S. election 2020. Many of the people sanctioned today, Prigozhin, his network, it extends into Africa. One of the people sanctioned, Malkovich. Malkovich was sanctioned in 2018 for the midterm election. He's now sanctioned again. So this system continued to perpetuate because we just didn't do anything during those middle years between 2016 and 2020. We had very limited actions because President Trump was the president, and that was always the barrier to really going full circle like we did today.
Well, you just hinted at where I want to go with you, Andrew Weissmann. I mean, do you think that this intelligence about Kilimnik's conduct after he received the targeting and campaign information from Manafort, what he did with it, was known to U.S. intelligence? I mean, what information or intelligence did the U.S. Treasury Department have when they wrote what was released in today's sanction that you did not have as a Mueller team investigator?
Well, the one thing that is clear, as you've reported, Nicole, is we did not have the piece that is what Kilimnik did with the polling data that we now know from the release today actually went, as Clint said, directly to Russian intelligence. The interesting question that I don't know the answer to is, was that information known to the intelligence community at the time of the Mueller investigation? You know, my sort of educated speculation on that would be it would seem like it would have to have been known because the Biden administration has only been operational for, I'm in New York, so I'll say a New York minute. So it seems unlikely that they really went ahead with that deep an investigation and got the information that quickly. So the question is sort of why didn't it get to the special counsel investigation? And, you know, I spearheaded the Manafort part of that investigation. I can tell you it certainly would have been a great interest, and we tried to turn over every rock that we could to prove up this link. And I would just say a good analogy of this is Watergate. You know, in Watergate, you know, you had the Republicans breaking into the Democratic Party because you want to know what your opponent's doing. Well, now we have the complete link of we have Russia knowing exactly what the Trump campaign polling information was and what they were seeing as strengths and weaknesses of their own and of Hillary Clinton. So they could use that to, as Clint said, target what they were doing in both the hack and dump and also the influence campaign in terms of what states were vulnerable or not. One final piece is it's important to note that this is in the Mueller report, which is that Paul Manafort was conveying to Kilimnik what they were seeing in terms of which states were swing states, including places like Wisconsin. And that's something that was not generally well known. And so now we know that Kilimnik was relaying all of that information back to the GRU in Russia.
Well, and Donald Trump was carrying out his end of the bargain as well. Jonathan Lemire, let me show you some of the love he gave Vladimir Putin.
Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why you think our country's so innocent? If he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him. I've already said he is really very much of a leader. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
So, Jonathan Lemire, these comments sort of bordered on, you know, uninformed to puzzling to, maybe defiant and dismissive of his intelligence community. Certainly what you got from him in Helsinki falls in that category. But now, in light of the fact that a circle had been completed between not some lackey on his campaign, not some coffee boy, but his campaign chairman, who gave the most sensitive campaign data to Konstantin Kilimnik, who then gave it to Russian intelligence, it certainly casts all of Trump's flattery and loyalty and public servitude to Vladimir Putin in a new light.
Precisely right. And that has always been the question here, right, Nicole, as to what really motivated President Trump with his adoration, let's use that word, of Vladimir Putin. And look, we know some of it can be ascribed to the fact that Trump is always drawn to strong men, not just Putin, but others around the globe as well. But it always ran deeper than that with Putin. It ran, to the point where it sort of defined American foreign policy. And there were certainly some levels of the government that did issue sanctions on the Russians. The Senate, and it was a rare moment where they rebuked President Trump, the Republican-controlled Senate, when they also took measures against Russia. But that tone was never set from the top. And we know that there was never the Trump not only denied it in Helsinki when he sided with Putin over U.S. intelligence, but later he repeatedly did. And when he warned Putin, and said, well, don't ever do it again, at a summit the following year, when he refused to confront him on things like the reports of possible bounties on American soldiers. And there's certainly been exhaustive investigations into potential financial links, other measures, talk of compromise that involve Trump and the Russians. But certainly now, with this new information, it does raise more questions. What exactly was the other end of the deal here? What favor, perhaps, was Trump trying to repay with all that flattery of Putin and the friendly American policy towards him?
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.